We begin this hour in West Africa, where we understand that the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited has compulsorily retired all management staff with less than 15 months to statutory retirement. In a statement issued earlier today, the company disclosed that the retirement of all the affected workers was with immediate effect. It added that the move is part of a bid to pursue effective organizational renewal to support the delivery of its strategic business objectives. The retirement of the top management staff is coming barely 3 days after the retirement of the Executive Vice President, Gas, Power and New Energy, Abdul Kabar Ahmed, Executive Vice President, Upstream Engineer Adokiye Tombomie, and also the Executive Vice President, Downstream Adeyemi Adetunji. Public Affairs Analyst Gbolahan Olojede and presidential candidate of the Accord Party, Professor Chris Imomolen. But of course, we will be joined by Professor Imomolen much later, but we currently have Gbolahan Olojede to, of course, do justice to this particular development. Thank you so much for your time, Gbolahan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so let's get straight to it. I mean, looking at this major shakeup from, a political and even economic standpoint, what's your immediate reaction?
Well, it's a very sweeping one. Ordinarily, an employer should have the right to say, okay, your employment is no longer required, or your service is no longer required. That right should be reasonably there. Even in some more sophisticated society, I remember in business school back in the US, then we learned about what you call employment at will, which says that the employer can ask the employee to go for good reason, for bad reason, or for no reason. But having said that, in the oil and gas space, what we're used to will be things around voluntary exit, in which you tell some staff, it may not even be 15 months to retirement people. It could be anybody across the cadre. You define the criterion and you can ask people to voluntarily leave the organization. And you pay them their dues for taking that option. So while we recognize the fact that an employer should be able to say services no longer required, whatever is due to these people should be made available to them as part of the entire process. But if we don't refresh that institution, which I think may be what the government has in mind, the institution needs a refresh. Otherwise, nothing will really change about that institution.
So are you saying that to some extent this is some sort of move in the right direction?
If it is properly managed, yes. If it is not properly managed, it will devolve to all sorts of problems, including litigations and protests in some quarters. People will say, "Oh, my people are the ones being retired," and all of that. But if it is properly managed, an employer should reserve the right to say, "It is time for you to go, and here is your compensation. Thank you very much." So, in the spirit of refreshing that institution, there must be certain fundamental restructuring, and it will involve staff, because it is the people that make an organization. There is no way you can change NNPC without doing a major restructuring that will involve a certain category of staff.
Now, of course, what are your thoughts concerning the narrative that political interference and also inconsistent policies, amongst other issues, are some of the factors negating or confronting the oil company? Also, vis-a-vis the allegation levied against the NNPC that it was a source of funding for political parties. As a presidential candidate in the last general election, what are your thoughts on some of this really, really deep, will I call it conspiracies right now?
Okay, I would not want to get into the politics of it, but I will still be able to make certain comments along that line. In 1978, I believe, when Obasanjo became the president, was it 77? One of the major crises that was on the ground was the $2.8 billion scandal. It was on the table. That was 1977. We also remember the windfall of the Gulf War. That was what IBB had to deal with. We remember Jonathan's subsidy issue. We also remember all the stories around subsidy for so many years now. We know the story around how Nigeria used to produce $2.5 million per day of crude has suddenly become a country that was producing 131,000 barrels per day. So something is deeply wrong with that institution. Unfortunately for Nigeria, that institution is very critical, at least in the short run, for the survival of this country. Remember that about 90% of the foreign exchange earnings of Nigeria comes from crude. So nobody can afford to joke with an institution like NNPC. Let me also mention, I used to be in oil and gas. That institution has certain categories of staff, what I call knowledge staff. If you're looking for the best of the best, who can stand their own anywhere in the world, you will find them in that same institution. So how we restructure that institution, keep on those knowledge staff that are critical to the survival, and at the same time be able to refresh that institution is at the heart of what we need to do. But I have no doubt in my mind that the institution is due for a fundamental refresh.
All right, now looking into the future, what would you say should be the priority or the focus right now of the NNPC to make it more effective, profitable, and more focus-oriented?
Let's be able to go forward with the business side of NNPC. That will straighten out things. So we now have, for example, NNPC Limit. It's a business. All the limited businesses like that in Nigeria or outside of Nigeria are making money. Saudi Aramco made so much money in the last year that some people describe the profit as obscene. Whereas in Nigeria, our own equivalent is struggling. A lot of times, it wasn't even able to provide money to the central wallet of this country. So obviously, we need to transit that institution away from what it had been. I mentioned 1977, that was a major crisis, $2.8 billion, 1977. The Gulf windfall, we are unable to explain it as we speak. All the subsidy issues, all the crash in crude production, we need to move that institution towards private sector efficiency. And let NNPC Limited be able to run as a business, make profit, have a proper corporate governance. You know, a lot of people were just smiling at what happened subsequent to PIB when NNPC Limited was created. Because for them, they did not see what has changed. It was the same people, the same board. So they were asking, is it a change of name? So we need to begin to put those structures in place that will be convincing that this is not just about a change of name. The right corporate governance, the right board that will drive NNPC Limited like a business, that we can once again begin to look at positioning that institution like its peers across the world. That is at the heart of what we need to do. The NNPC that is just a huge wallet for all sorts, including political people to dip their hands into, that must stop. The warning, though, is that this is going to be a big issue because the system will fight back. So how we're able to manage the process is very critical to the success of what the government seems to be trying to do.
All right, thank you so much for your time, Gbolahan Olojede.
The pleasure is.
All right.